Hey, welcome back. I'm Eric Marquez, your host. I'm back with Josiah Job, lead pastor for New Life Community Church, and Matt DiMatteo, director of New Life Centers. And welcome, guys. Good to be back with you. And
Good to be here.
last time we talked about the dream, right? The dream, kind of what New Life Centers is, the dream, how we got there. We talked a little bit about what we're kind of doing now, but today's all about what's happening on the ground. So we're going to kind of go into a deep dive and discuss like the nuts and bolts of what Centers does. And I know we talked a little bit about that in the previous episode, but I really want you to flesh out for someone listening who's thinking, man, how could I do something like this? Is this something that they've been dreaming about, putting their lives into something that could make a difference, and this is like scratching that itch? But maybe it's not in Chicago. Maybe it's in Miami. Maybe it's, in Houston. So I'd really like to just kind of create a really clear picture of how we do what we're setting out to do. Does that make sense?
So you mentioned kind of the five main categories, but maybe going a level deeper and talking about some of the actual ministry that happens within those five categories of the ministries. I know that you have different names of ministries that are kind of underneath that.
Yep.
Kind of talk through some of that and explain in more depth kind of what New Life Centers is.
Yep. Yeah, and I think, again, started in 2005, all volunteer, no staff. And I think one of the themes is start with what you have. So we started small, and my passion, again, was sports. I love sports. I love working with youth. So we started there, and we drew in people that wanted to work on that. And so as we've grown, we've taken the passions and the wiring that God's already given you, because you're going to do the best work if you do something within your wiring. You love music.
Yeah.
And so you can do it in your sleep. You're passionate about it. You're playing at night. You love doing worship ministry. You started the worship residency, all those things, because music's your passion.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing something in your passion, it doesn't feel like work. And so you're going to be able to go and really see God using. God gave you that. Me, if I led music outreach and ministry, man, we would have about 2 people, and it would be my wife and my mom. And that's about it.
Kids didn't even show up, huh?
No, kids didn't show up for sure.
Bella's like, deuces, I'm out.
So kind of our 5 things now: mentoring, education, sports, peacemaking, and food distribution. So mentoring started as organic, volunteer, walking with young people. Started with a group of 10. And that was that original 10 that we were mentoring, walking life on life.
Like, did you just open up the church building here in Little Village, or were you like in a school? Were you invited by a school?
Yep, so we were right here. We worked with the probation officer, and he asked us, would you want to mentor gang-involved youth? And we started. And so we would have Tuesdays, we'd have a substance abuse counselor come in. They would do counseling. We just opened up a room in the building. Wednesdays, we had art therapy, opened up a room in the building. Fridays would be like a drop-in hangout. That's where we'd have Little Caesars Pizza. We'd have pool table for 3 years. Pool table, hanging out, and it was relationship building. We'd do a garage sale and save up a couple $100, and then we'd go to go-karts, or we'd go to these things. We do once a month outing, and that was just organic. How do you love on young people? And so mentoring has grown now. We have 400 mentoring matches. We are in the schools now. And so having seen that, we started with in the community. Then we started working with juveniles on probation. Then we started connecting in the schools. And now a new thing happened. There was a young man who was killed last year. And I sat down with Chicago Public Schools and asked, we were asking each other the question, how do we prevent the next shooting? How do we prevent that incident? It was a 13-year-old young man. And we said, hey, our mentoring model, we can do that. So we started mentoring in Chicago Public Schools. So in the school across the street right here, we have a room in each of the school buildings where we're at. We're invited in. We run what's called CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. So it's a group therapy model where we have 16 topics. It might be around depression, trauma, pain, sexuality, whatever it is. And we have this open conversation with 10 young people at a time. The mentors in that circle, we're walking with them. And the school, pays for it. We have 12 full-time mentors on staff doing that. And so mentoring is kind of the thread that's throughout all we do. It's that life on life. My mentee, I started when he was 10 years old.
Yeah.
He's turning 20 in a month, and he's now running the pantry. So he runs all operations on the pantry.
So mentoring doesn't look the same way, like when you say it moves through every thread. So there's like different modes of mentoring,
Correct.
so to speak. So you got the in the classroom, but you also have kind of the hangout chill spot. We have
sports mentoring, we have school-based mentoring, we have group mentoring, we have Arise Creations, which is our social entrepreneurship, jewelry making. We're
Yeah,
about to
talk
launch
about
our-
Arise, because
Yeah, it's
Arise
pretty
is a
cool.
really beautiful model of a way
Yeah.
of doing ministry with young girls.
So probably, 12, 13 years ago, we needed a safe space for girls. And so we started a program, and one of our directors loved jewelry making. She actually just made jewelry on her own, started teaching girls. And so we used to call it Bling, building leaders in the next generation. And it was a jewelry design. Now we call it Arise Creations. But using the tool of jewelry making as the hook, the girls would make this jewelry. We actually paid them. They got a stipend for each piece, and so it was an income for them. It was a job. But we started making these beautiful pieces. Kind of our signature piece is called the Urban Hope piece. It's a piece of broken bus stop glass wrapped in wire, and it's a beautiful piece. And it's the idea is beauty out of brokenness. So even though we're broken, and we've gone through a lot, we carry a lot, there's still beauty inside of us, and
Yeah.
God sees that beauty.
Awesome.
Now we have a whole line of jewelry. In this space, we're going to start selling that jewelry full time. And so you have Arise Creations. And so mentoring can be sports-based mentoring. I'm out there coaching soccer, and I have a caseload of 10 young people that I walk with. Me, I use baseball. We have street outreach, and that's mentoring. So mentoring is infused everywhere, but there's 400 mentoring matches. On the education side, we have 125 kids that come to our after-school programs. That's 5 days a week. So we actually open up the building, 3 to 6 window. We'll walk across the street and get 40 kids from that school. They come across, they get tutoring help, they have a Bible time, they have gym time, they have snack time, and it's really a safe place. And I would say since COVID, we actually saw the need less importance on homework help and more importance on social emotional support.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids, man, fell back hard
Yeah.
in social emotional connection community. And so we really connect with that school. In Humble Park, we have 80 kids that come to our after school.
Wow.
Then in the summer, it becomes a 5 days a week kids camp where we go around the city, explore field trips, have fun times, etc.
And so obviously you're working on a different scale right now, but it started with this the desire to be willing, like I've heard you say that many times, willing, right, to step into a space and basically just to live life on life with somebody, one-on-one, being willing to share that space with them, to be intentional. And it could be, in a school setting, or it could be, at a bowling alley, but it's just being intentional about that one-on-one. So, how do you scale that? Well, I think what we're seeing now is you're able to scale that into sports and Arise Creation and school mentoring and after-school programs, but it didn't all start like that.
It started with my wife started 22 years ago with 8 kids.
Wow.
And she, 3 days a week, would open up the space for those 8 kids. And the cool part is, one of the girls who was in it, she was probably 8 years old when we started. She's now the director of the program.
Wow.
And so we've organically seen, as we've grown, we have 80 staff now at New Life Centers. I would say over 30 of them are young people that came through our programs.
It's amazing.
Wow.
And so I'd love to tell you we had some strategic plan to do that. It would have been cool. But I think it's just that life on life. When an opportunity opens, who better to lead the work than those that have come through the work, those who have transformed their lives, who have really been in the grind in New Life. And now we're upping that. We're making that even more powerful by having leadership development around that. We're putting them through training, through mentoring, through discipleship, and intentionally going after those 18 to 24-year-olds now, who we believe that the answer to the challenges in the community should come from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think it's, again, power of Christ with all that God's been doing. And so it's interesting dynamic that we're now training those young people. And we've been, like I talked about in episode 1, when you're there for the long haul and you've been there over 22 years, then now you have generational. The kids that I started with in youth group are now watching my kids and mentoring my kids. Ivan, who we started with when he was 5, he's mentoring my 13-year-old. And so you have this cycle of mentoring that we infuse all throughout as well. And so it's that the secret sauce is relationships.
Yeah.
It's not a program. It's relationships. It's you can use your love for music, and you can really, you can mentor somebody, you can guide them, you're going to play guitar, you're going to sing, you're going to do those things because you're passionate, and there's other people that want to learn that.
Yeah.
We have a young guy who loves photography. He started teaching 8th graders photography. Now one of these young men started his own business and does photography for events, and he's doing editing. These kids know tech. They know the arts. My son does TikToks on his phone with sports videos, so Sox and Cubs players, and he makes edits, adds music. He gets 60,000 likes per video now.
Wow.
And he's like, I didn't even know he was doing it. And he goes, hey, you should subscribe to my channel. And I go and look, and I'm like, dude, 60,000? And it's called Sports Productions, and he's like doing all this stuff. This is on his phone.
That's hilarious.
So my point is using the power of tech, using the power of the arts,
Using what
the
you
power
have.
of sports,
You should hire
whatever
the
you're
boy, man.
passionate about.
Hire the boy, you know?
Exactly.
Get some awareness out there.
Exactly. So with sports, man, when my daughter was 4, I went to sign her up at the local Little League. There was no Little League, so we started one. We had 60 kids year one. It was small but mighty. Now we have 300 kids playing baseball. We did a 16-inch
All at one
softball.
park?
All at one park.
Wow.
So we have a 16-inch softball. It's a very Chicago thing. It's a ball the size of a cantaloupe. You play with no gloves. We needed a safe space for street outreach, so we started with 6 teams, 8 teams, 10 teams. Now we have 24 teams playing in a softball league.
Wow.
And so using the power of sport, we program 2,500 young people. And it's 2,500 now, but we started a running program because Epi loves running. We started a boxing program because Mario loves boxing. We started a basketball program because Benny loves basketball. And it started with a small team, and then a league, and then now a wider league, and now a citywide league. And so that 2,500 is 15 years of work, growing and being faithful in the small. So that's the sports piece.
So you do soccer as well, right?
Yep, we do soccer. We have a soccer league. We have year-round training of soccer. We partner up with the Chicago Fire. We do a ton around soccer, but not always. It's interesting. We're in a Latino community, but we didn't have a staffer that loves soccer. And now we hired Ivan, came on. He loves soccer. I mean, soccer is taking off.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I'm thinking, like, you know, on this scale right now, you guys got to do a lot of garage sales or a lot of car washes to fund this. You know, how do you fund this? Like, how do you make this happen? I get the relational piece, right?
Yeah.
But you got to pay the bills too, right?
Yeah.
You got staff. What do you say? 80 staff now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're not feeding them Little Caesars, but.
Some days, a lot of tacos and Little Caesars, but we have a bunch of government grants, a bunch of individual support, a bunch of foundation support. So it started with the members of the church just doing that out of their pocket.
That sounds like a headache.
It's a lot of work. So I mean, you have our first grant was from Chicago Public Schools, and it was a high learning curve. I'll say that. If you go into city and government grants, there is a high learning curve. There's a lot of accountability. There's a lot of administration. And it was painful, still is painful. But God, I mean, at each step of the way, God's provided the exact amount we needed. And we've had to say no to money. Not all money is good money.
Yeah.
And so I think knowing if it's going to fund your vision and you can reach it, we have government grants from across the city, the county, the state, all who believe in the work we do because they see the impact. So they see the fruit, they see our good deeds, they see all that, and they want to come behind it. But you have to really diversify your resources. And again, like I said in the first episode, if you would have told me, man, we would have had $7 million, I would have thought, dude, we're living it big. And we're blessed. We're blessed to have that. But it's being wise. When you're wise with the small and faithful with the small, God opens up that next door.
You guys learned that lesson early on too, and we've talked about this you've learned it the hard way sometimes with rowing ministries and things like that. But being able to know where you're going, and then that makes it so much easier to say no. But a lot of times, you know, the challenges and difficulties that come in our life are because we say yes to everything, right?
Right.
Talk about saying no, Matt, and you know, what compels you to say no, what guides you in saying no to a lot of these opportunities, even to money, which is like, who would say no to money? But a lot of times saying no.
We're
even
talking
to
millions
resources.
of dollars here, right? Like not.
Yeah, no, in the last 4 weeks, I've said no to $2.8 million. And so if you hear that, you're like, what an idiot.
Yeah.
But
dummy.
you have state money that is, man, heavy administrative. Certain things. One of the funders said, hey, you're not able to speak of your faith an hour before, an hour after program. They were going to give us $150,000 a year. We obviously said no because a big part of our work is our faith.
Yeah.
And so I think every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something, whether you know it or not. And so you have to have the power of no, being able to say no. After one of our first grants, they changed it from community-based to school-based. They said instead of one mentor to 10 kids, we want you to do one mentor to 25 kids. And instead of focusing on community-based outcomes, we want you to focus on behavior, attendance, and grades. We thought and prayed about it, and we turned down $100,000. And it was hard. but 6 months later, God provided exactly $100,000.
Yeah.
And so I think if you protect a big part of my job is protecting the vision,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because you can quickly, man, take on all kinds of things where you look nothing like when you started,
Yeah.
or you end up somewhere you don't even want to be.
Yeah.
And so it's knowing what to say yes to. It's praying for wisdom, and knowing that all money is not good money.
Yeah.
And part of that is knowing who you are, right?
Yep.
If you know who you are and where you're going, it makes it so much easier to be able to say no, because you go, well, that's not who we are,
Right.
or that's taking away from who we are.
Yeah.
And this is who we are. We're serious about our faith. And so if that's something that you're going to say, we'll do with all the other stuff, but without your faith, you go, you know what, man, we really appreciate you guys, but we're going to say no to that because we know
Yeah.
who we are. And so just word to anybody who's leading an organization or a group or this and that, when opportunities, when resources come to you, you need to really define who you are and
Right.
know who you are, because
Yeah.
as things get bigger and start moving quicker, if you don't know who you are, you will say yes to everything, and you'll
Yeah.
ultimately end up sabotaging your organization, your group,
Yeah.
your vision, because you haven't defined who you are and where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get what you're saying, Matt. As the director of New Life Centers, you are guarding the vision, right? Protecting it, making sure it doesn't drift, away. But I know that you've said this earlier, that you have a heavy incorporation of team, right? And so I know there's no way you could have done any of these things unless you had a solid team of people that help navigate through these types of situations,
Yep.
right? People that were speaking to you about maybe blind spots that you had, right? You're a growing leader, like you said,
Yep.
you didn't have it all together, totally feel inadequate. I'm sure there's days where you still feel inadequate sitting at the tables that you're sitting at now.
Every other day, usually.
Every other day, yeah. But man, that's a tough space to be in. But talk about the team. So what is from where it started, that's one thing, right? But boots on the ground today, this team, how are you able to manage all of these different mentoring modes,
Yeah.
effectively?
You have to, as you grow, and this is not just ministry growth, this is organizational growth. As you go from 2015, we were 7 people on our team.
Wow.
And 2016, we had a big spike. We were awarded the top mentoring program in the state of Illinois, got recognition, people started giving resources, went to about 25. And so managing from 7 to 25 is a big jump. And
Yeah.
how do you create systems? Your staff meetings all of a sudden are a little unwieldy. You have 25 people instead of 7. Then we had a big spike in 2017. We went to about 35 people. And then now we've more than doubled. We're at 80 people. And
Yeah.
so as you think and grow, and especially now in 2022, hiring is really hard.
Yeah.
Finding people. And even with the resources, finding people.
Yeah.
And so we had to get creative. We had to say, you know what, let's start to grow from within. And there's advantages to that and disadvantages to that.
Yeah.
And so it takes more time. You need a leadership structure.
Yeah,
so
slow and slow study, right?
yeah, and so I started, have our board of directors, but then I have our exec team that for a while was our key operations, program, finance, myself. Then I've created now a directional team. That's a team of about 12 that's diverse across age, location in our ministry, type of ministry we're doing, to just have different perspectives. Because I think if you lead out of only your perspective, you got a lot of blind spots.
Yeah.
And so now, and now with 80 people, there's plenty of staff that I don't get a lot of time with at all. But a key thing I do is I'm on every interview. I'm on every second interview. So if we're going to hire somebody, I've been a part of every single one of those, because I want to know and see and be able to share that vision and know if there's alignment to the vision.
Yeah.
Because rapid growth, you can drift from your mission too.
Yeah.
If you hire and you start to hire a lot of positions that are outside of your vision, the thing can kind of veer off. And so protecting the vision, a huge part of that is in hiring.
Yeah.
I've learned it's way easier to hire than it is to fire.
Yeah.
And so if they don't feel there's a fit, man, don't even offer the job. And sometimes we're feeling that because, like, man, we're stretched. I need people.
Yeah.
But if you start to blur your lines or lower your standards, then you're just slowly burning up the vision and eating away at it. And so the temptation is to just hire a ton of people, anybody that applies, but you have to protect it. So I think then it's walking with your team. As an ED now, my key things: protect the vision, build the team, raise the money, and key partnerships. So and building the team is getting the right people in, but then letting my team lead within. So I'm not in a lot of these day-to-day meetings because I spend my time with city partners, connections. I spend my time fundraising. but I'm with the leadership and protecting the vision and all we do.
But you're still coaching a soccer team.
I am coaching baseball. That's my
And
peace
basketball.
spot. For my kids, and that's the messy part with the balance of family is my kids are involved in all of my programs. They're
So it's not the same as you just doing a program, you
Yeah.
know, the way you
My-
used to do it. I mean, there's overlap, but it is you
My kids
investing
don't
in
view
your
it as
kids.
a program. They view it as the local little league. And they're
course.
like tonight, I'll be out there coaching, and that's my sanctuary. The baseball field is where I can turn off the Zoom meetings, the fundraising, the headaches. I can literally just coach.
By the way,
baseball.
your kids are like killing it too. So
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see them. We partner with the Chicago Cubs, so team that I go for. My friends here are part of the other side.
The better side.
But I think we work a lot with Cubs charities.
Yeah.
We just are connecting with Sox charities and see how you can build with these professional teams. The Chicago Bears are bringing all their rookies out next Friday to
That's
see the
awesome.
pantry, to be here. And so even working with professional teams and working in partnership, kids get to see, especially for kids from the South and West side that normally don't have access to that, they get to see, man, the professional side of sports. They get cool experiences. They get to meet players. They get to go to games, but they get to see, man, I have value. I have worth. And so that's the heart of what we want to give. So I love coaching.
So 2017, you said there was a spike in employees. You guys are getting certain types of grants, right? You're getting a little bit of money to fund that, and then we're sitting right now in a beautiful, like, completely rehabbed building that's going to be a food pantry distribution center, right?
Yep.
And I'll let you talk about that in a minute, but talk to us about the story of, like, before this happened. I'm thinking, was it 2020 when you're like, hey, we have a goal, we're feeding, how many people were you guys feeding in that time?
So pre-COVID, we were feeding 100 families a week, and we would go to the South Loop Trader Joe's, we'd pick up food rescue and come back, and we did that for 12 years. And so we would faithfully feed 100 families until the food's gone. And then as the pandemic hit, we realized, like, man, this is a serious thing. Families lost their jobs, they need food.
We need to
and
up
so,
it.
yeah, we need to up it. And so we had started to partner more with Trader Joe's. We were feeding 400 families a week. President Obama heard about what we're doing. He highlighted us on his Instagram, and that got 1 million likes. And so then Rick Bayless, a chef here in Chicago, Intelligentsia Coffee, Garrett's Popcorn, all started reaching out and say, how do we feed? And then I remember me and Josiah had a meeting where we said, man, how does the church come alongside? We need more food. We're out of food.
it was really early on in the pandemic too.
Yeah.
And we were just trying to like, hey, we actually got on. It wasn't even to talk about food. We got on this call and we're like, Matt, what were you doing? And Matt was like, I just got finished with this meeting and we put out this Google Doc and there was 500 names of people that needed food and we had to cut the list off. And so we started kind of dreaming and saying, well, man, there's going to be a huge need. And, you know, of course, no one knew how long the pandemic was going to go. And we had no clue, but we knew that there was a need. And so, you know, I didn't know food. And I just started asking some questions to Matt, too, like, hey, the first idea was, hey, should we raise money? Because we were going to take up an offering around that time. Matt's like, hey, what if we take an offering? And, you know, I said, hey, listen, food's really expensive and that's good. But if this goes for a long time, I mean, that will burn up quickly and we'll just keep taking offerings. I said, is there a partner? Is there somebody in the city of Chicago that had food? And Matt threw out, could we say their name? Greater Chicago Food. Matt threw out Greater Chicago Food and a couple others. And they had tried to have partnerships in the past, but had challenges, right? You know, some challenges around just kind of being super open about our faith, right? Because we've said that's kind of one of the things that we're not willing to kind of
Shy away from.
Yeah, shy away from or not be strong about. And so I said, Matt, reach out. And then we had another pastor with us and said, you know, this crazy goal was, he's like, what if we should set a goal? He's like, we should set a goal. What if we were able to feed, like, I think it was like 1,000 people. I don't know if it was a week or a month or it was like 1,000 people a week or something like that. We were
Which
all like,
probably was like a huge.
you don't understand at that moment in time
massive.
when we talked about it, we're like, man, that would be like
massive.
revival. That would be like God doing the craziest thing we could possibly imagine. To be able to sustain 1,000 people week after week after week would be crazy. So Matt he's like, all right. Phone conversation ends. Matt starts reaching out, starts, you know, working with some networks, reaches out to Greater Chicago Food, and I think it was within, Matt, 2 months maybe? Within 2 months?
Within 1 month. So we had the conversation. We signed up locations in May. By May 1st, we were feeding 1,000 families a week. By June 1st, 6,000 families a week, about 30,000 people. And we've kept that pace ever since. I mean,
So just think about that. Like that short, within 2 months, there's 30,000 people that are being fed through 7 different New Life locations.
A week.
Yeah, the church is the muscle. Greater Chicago Food is providing literally millions of pounds of food for us to distribute. We're giving out 50 to 75 pounds of food, high quality stuff. We're giving out milk and fruit and yogurts and this and all this stuff. People are we're starting this new model too, because the way they did it before was different. But with COVID, people were super scared about contact with people.
Yeah.
So we create this like drive-through method, and we are literally moving thousands, and it goes to be millions of pounds of food every single week, feeding 30,000 people. And
so thinking through, numbers tell a story, but this is a pretty powerful story. In the last year, how many people have we fed through food
since the
distribution?
beginning of the pandemic, we fed over 2.2 million people. Each week now, we feed around 10,000 people per day. And so and this space used to be a corner store, and we were able to, it closed down pre-pandemic. Owner was going to sell. They gave us the keys and let us use it to feed people. A few months into the pandemic, a buyer came on, and we said, cool, we'll move back to the church. But then our funders said, man, what if we were to buy this building?
And this building, by the way, that he's talking about is directly across the street from the church.
Yeah.
So the church is on the other side of the street right now. And this
I'm looking at it through the window right now.
Yeah, this was just a grocery store that was no longer being used, right? Like a small convenience store.
So our funders raised $500,000 in 3 months, and we bought the building cash.
Wow.
We've been on an 18-month rehab project, and then in 2 weeks, it'll open up as the Pan de Vida Fresh Market, Bread of Life Fresh Market. Families can come get free groceries and get wraparound services. This room we're in will be a state-of-the-art computer lab. And again, back to, if you would have told me 2 years ago, pre-COVID, that we would have been in this spot, I would have laughed out loud.
You guys are trying to feed 1,000 families, and now we have a facility that's going to not only do that, but even more.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So there's this idea of like, man, he is able to do more than we can ever imagine, right? What God is doing.
How do you strategize that? I mean, how do you figure out how to scale to feed 30,000 people a week? I mean, I don't know.
It was interesting. We hired, so remember, we used our PPP loan, and we had the loan, and we used it to hire our young people. Now, we were paying them $25 an hour, which was high, but it's because all of them, their families lost their job. Like their whole home lost their income. And so we were able to sustain those families through that. That money lasted about 4 months. And we were able to get more resources, but one of my favorite parts of this story is it was 18 to 24-year-olds who stepped up in a pandemic to feed the masses. It was an army of 200 volunteers plus across New Life who stepped up to feed these families. And so we've continued that. God's provided the money, the operations money to continue. And you make it up as you go. I mean, literally, we figured out systems how to feed on the drive up. Then we got a forklift to get more food because we couldn't receive food from trucks because they said, "Where's your dock?" I'm laughing out loud.
You don't understand how much time and energy goes into these. Like, you don't think about these things. Like, what do you do with cold food when it's blazing 90 degrees outside in the summertime in Chicago? Because we were doing this for so long. What do you do with food when it's freezing outside? What do you do with What do you do with food? Because food's fine. What do you do with your volunteers, and your team when it's 10 degrees outside or negative and everyone's freezing? So like through all the seasons, we had to just figure this out. But there was one thing that we were committed to, and the one thing we were committed to is there's people that need food, and we're going to do whatever it takes to give them food and to love them in this way.
Yeah.
No matter the cost, no matter the temperature, no matter the work. And it was a ton of work. I mean, people were going through so much personally, emotionally, mental health wise, isolation. But there was just this camaraderie amongst the team and this unity amongst the team. Like, we're going to do whatever. Like, this is our moment to shine in the middle of crisis. Is a huge opportunity. And there was just, God able to do amazing things in that dark season.
As we wrap things up, I want to focus on that last piece. You mentioned how you're in the second interview of every person that's hired because you want to guard that vision. So there's somebody that you're looking for. There's someone that's conducive, right? That the chemistry's right for something like this. I'm thinking about the person watching this right now who's thinking, man, could I do something like that? I have a desire. I want to do something meaningful. I don't want to just push buttons or do this. Like, I want to do something that is changing people's lives. can I do something like this? You're looking for a certain person. And to what you just said, like, it's not just about throwing money. It's great we got these grants and all those things, but we were doing it when there was no money, right? So that wasn't what limited us. We're just able to scale it a little bit differently when we have the funding. But you can't just throw money at a program and that's going to solve everything, right? So who are you looking for? Like, what type of crazy are we looking for, in an environment like this?
Yeah, I think somebody who's, faith-filled, available, committed to stay there for the long haul. I specifically ask, hey, we're asking for at least a year commitment. This is of our volunteer mentors, of our volunteers, of staff, because we don't want people to come in and out like a revolving door.
Yeah.
And we're trying to provide, safe havens for young people. And in the south and west side of Chicago, young people are used to people coming in and out of their lives. And so having somebody who's willing to press in, who's willing to have thick skin. This isn't easy work. And so I think all of those things, if somebody's looking to start this, it's start with what you have, what's right in front of you. Start small, just start doing it. I think people sometimes think, I need to go off and get this training, this certification, I need to wait until I'm ready in life. And if you look at the disciples were 12 men who had...
You're talking about the disciples from the Bible, right?
Exactly.
Okay, just make sure.
You have the disciples in the Bible who were really, fishermen, who were tax collectors, who were people who didn't have this formal ministry training. They saw the hope of Christ right in front of them and then followed. All they did is say, okay, how do I take the next step?
Yeah, man.
They didn't have a strategic plan. They didn't have everything laid out, but they knew, you know what? If I follow Christ and I walk after him, hey, God will open the doors.
And that's actually what's noticed about them in the book of Acts as well, right? It was noticed about them is that these are men that walk with Jesus.
Yep.
And I think that's the key is like, hey, listen, you can accomplish amazing things when you're, following the Lord and allowing him to use his power and his might through you. And you don't have to have, really, I think some of the greatest movements in the world, not that strategy's bad or I think you should do that. I think you should think through things and, read great books but great movements are typically messy, right?
Yep.
And disorganized. And it's people just saying, God, I'm going to follow you as you do the amazing thing. And I'm willing to follow you into the messy. And you become who God's called you to be a lot of times in the middle of that messy, right?
Yep.
And you're just like day by day becoming more like him, learning the lessons. You don't learn everything from a book. You don't learn everything in school. There's certain things that you're just going to learn in the trenches of ministry and of loving people.
And what I love about New Life Centers, and obviously we have seen the Lord's hand in blessing it, right, along the whole way. Not that it didn't have its hardships. You deal with some really heavy things, right? The loss of young ones' lives and just the damage, right? The hardship. It's really taxing. It can be very taxing, but it's also very rewarding to see how God meets those needs, where prayers are being answered before your very eyes through not just church members, but through non-believers, non-believers who are throwing money into something that they see making a change, right? Which is pretty powerful. And so, our hope is if you're watching this podcast, if you're inspired, because that's what we want. We want to inspire. We want to bring awareness that there are things that are making a difference. And maybe you're sitting at your church or you're sitting in your city or in your neighborhood and you're like, man, I need to be doing something like this. Or maybe you're in the Chicagoland area and you want to come and check out what New Life Centers is doing. I know Matt would love to show you, his team will show you. You can email us at info@newlifecenters.org. Is that right? That's right. Yep.
Yeah, website, you can just head to newlifecenters.org and can see all about the programs.
Yeah. Or maybe your location, maybe you're in a different city. You're like, man, we need something like this. We don't know how to get it started. We would love to be able to give you whatever we have. So that we can make an impact. So if you're dreaming big, if you want to make an impact, you want to throw your time, your energy for the long haul, right? Because you're ready, you're willing, right? For the long haul, man, reach out. We'd love to share what we have. Hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned. Share this podcast with somebody that you think also needs to be inspired. And I just want to thank you guys for being here. Matt, you're doing a great work, man. I know it's hard, but you're pushing through. It's an example, really. It is a testimony of what God can do, right? Through people who are dedicated to him, who are willing to risk it all. Amen. And I think that's a beautiful picture. Josiah, thanks for being here too, speaking into this, man. As a lead pastor of New Life Community Church, you have a big partnership in how these two organisms maybe, work together. So praise God for that.
Yeah, thanks for leading as well.